The soul does not age the way the body does. It does not accumulate years so much as it accumulates weight, the weight of everything it has survived, everything it has wanted and lost, everything it told itself it would never want again. And somewhere in the middle of all that accumulation, a person stops expecting to be surprised. Not because they gave up exactly, but because they made peace with the idea that certain kinds of love are simply not available to them anymore. That window, they told themselves, has quietly closed. And then something walks through the door that the window was supposedly blocking. This is not a story about romance in the conventional sense. It is not about attraction or timing or the serendipity of two people finding themselves in the same room. It is about something far older and far stranger than any of that. It is about what happens when the unconscious, yours and someone else's, decides that the time for resistance is over. When the psyche, which has been patiently orchestrating your entire emotional life from just below the surface of awareness, finally makes its move. Carl Jung spent decades trying to explain what most people experience as mystery. Why certain faces stop you cold. Why certain voices seem to reach somewhere inside you that has never been reached before. Why some connections feel less like discovery and more like memory. Like you are not meeting someone new, but recovering someone ancient. His answer was that we do not fall in love randomly. We fall in love archetypally. Something in us carries an image, an inner figure, shaped by everything we have ever been, everything we have ever needed, everything our ancestors experienced in the long dark of human becoming. And when we encounter a real person who activates that image, the unconscious moves toward them with a force that bypasses logic entirely. This is what is happening now, or what is about to happen. And it is coming from a direction you did not see, because you were looking the wrong way. The person moving toward you is younger, not in the way that people use that word dismissively, implying inexperience or naivety or a certain charming superficiality that fades with time. Younger in fire. Younger in the sense that the armor has not yet fully calcified around their heart. They have been disappointed, certainly. No one reaches the age of longing without disappointment. But they have not yet made the fatal decision to stop believing that love can be transformative. They still carry, somewhere beneath their practical life and their adult concerns, an almost irrational faith in the possibility of real connection. And that faith, rather than marking them as innocent, marks them as brave. Because maintaining that faith requires courage that only grows harder as time passes. When they look at you, they are not performing an assessment. They are not running calculations about compatibility or futures, or what your respective social positions mean when placed beside each other. None of that architecture is what moves them. What moves them is something they cannot fully name. A feeling of recognition so immediate and so certain that it almost frightens them. The Jungian term for this is projection, but that word has unfortunate connotations in ordinary usage, implying something false or problematic. In psychological reality, projection is the mechanism by which the unconscious reaches toward wholeness. When this person looks at you and feels that ancient pull of recognition, what they are experiencing is their inner world externalizing itself onto you. Their anima or animus, that inner figure of the opposite principle, suddenly alive and walking around in human form. You are not simply attractive to them. You are symbolic. You represent something their psyche has been searching for, not because you are perfect or because you have made yourself into something remarkable, but because something in your specific presence, your energy, your particular history of suffering and survival, the way you carry what you have been through, corresponds to the shape of what they have been unconsciously seeking. This is why the feeling between you will seem larger than any ordinary feeling. It is not imagination. It is the unconscious, which operates on a scale that the conscious mind can barely comprehend, making itself known. And here you might pause and object. You might say that this is all very well as theory, but that in practice it amounts to infatuation, which amounts to projection, which amounts to something that dissolves the moment reality sets in. And you would be right that projection can dissolve. You would be right that many connections which begin with that quality of archetypal recognition end when the image fades and the ordinary human being is revealed beneath it. This is the story of countless painful attachments. The beloved is never the real person, only the screen onto which the psyche has cast its film, and eventually the projector runs out of fuel and the screen goes blank and everyone feels foolish. But this is not that story. And here is how you will know the difference. Projection that meets substance does not dissolve. It deepens. When the image that someone has cast onto you corresponds to something genuinely true in you, when what they sensed is real, when the depth they felt beneath your surface is actually there, the evolution of the feeling is not away from you, but toward you. They move closer, not despite seeing you more clearly, but because of it. The scars they discover do not repel them. Your contradictions do not make them withdraw. Your silences, your difficult days, your edges, none of it breaks the connection, because the connection was never founded on a false image. It was founded on the recognition of something true. This is initiation, not infatuation. The difference between the two is everything. You are someone who has been through shadow. This is not a poetic euphemism. It is a psychological reality. You have walked through experiences that marked you, that required you to reckon with parts of yourself you would rather not have known were there. You have met your own limitations. You have confronted your own darkness. And you survived it, which means you carry something that cannot be acquired any other way. A kind of gravity, a depth, a quality of presence that comes only from having moved through difficulty without completely losing yourself. This is what individuation looks like from the outside. It is not glamorous, it is not always visible, but it is recognizable to anyone whose own psyche is oriented toward growth. To this younger person, that weight you carry is not a burden they pity. It is a quality they are drawn to in the same way that water is drawn toward ground. They are still, in some essential way, in motion, still working out who they are, still building the architecture of themselves. And you, with your hard-won solidity, offer something they have never quite found before. Not safety in the passive sense, not comfort in the numbing sense, but a kind of ground beneath their feet that allows them to move more freely rather than less. Your stability liberates them. Your depth challenges them to discover their own. And that dynamic, far from being imbalanced or problematic, is precisely the alchemy that makes this particular connection capable of becoming something real. But let us speak honestly about what this will ask of you. You have built a persona. Every person who has survived significant psychological difficulty has done the same. It is not vanity or deception. It is adaptation. The persona is the face you constructed to navigate the world without being overwhelmed by it. The strong one, perhaps. The self-sufficient one. The one who does not need much and does not ask for more. The one who is interested, but never too interested. Moved, but rarely visibly moved. Present, but always maintaining some careful internal distance. This persona has served you. It has kept you functional during periods when full vulnerability would have been genuinely dangerous. But it is not you. It is a set of protective habits, and like all protective habits, it has costs. What this person does not love is your persona. They are not fooled by it, not particularly interested in it, not impressed or intimidated by it in the way you might expect. What they love, what drew them toward you before they even fully understood what they were feeling, is the thing underneath. Your essence. The actual self that exists behind the careful management, behind the deflections and the distances. They can feel it, even when you are not showing it. And that is precisely what undoes every defense you have built, because your defenses were constructed to protect against people who could not see past the surface. Against someone who can, they have no function. This is where it gets confronting. When someone loves what you actually are, rather than what you present yourself as being, your shadow becomes visible. Jung defined the shadow as everything in us that we have not yet integrated. The disowned parts, the unresolved wounds, the aspects of ourselves we learned were unacceptable or too dangerous to express. Most of us go through life keeping our shadow largely hidden, especially from people we are romantically involved with.
Because vulnerability of that depth feels like offering someone a weapon. But this younger person, without trying and without demanding anything, will create conditions in which your shadow begins to emerge. Not because they are hunting for it, because their acceptance is so consistent and so genuine that the part of you which has been hiding slowly stops believing it needs to. And that process, shadow becoming visible without shame, without attack, without the punishment you have learned to expect, is more disorienting than almost anything you have been through. Because you know how to handle rejection. You have a whole system built around it. You know how to handle disappointment, misunderstanding, being asked to be different than you are. What you do not have a system for is being seen accurately and still chosen. That specific experience, consistency meeting vulnerability, devotion meeting the shadow, has no precedent in your emotional history. And things without precedent are always the most confronting. You will want to test it. This is almost inevitable. Some part of you will orchestrate small withdrawals, quiet provocations, moments designed to confirm that this too will eventually break the way everything else has. You will show some difficult edge of yourself and wait for the familiar withdrawal. You will say something honest and brace for the punishment. And they will not withdraw. They will not punish. They will simply remain. And that remaining will feel stranger than any rejection ever did. Because chaos, you understand. Chaos has a grammar you speak fluently. Healthy devotion is a language you are still learning. And its foreignness may initially feel like a flaw in them rather than a gap in you. Stay with it anyway. The nervous system changes slowly. It has been calibrated over years of experience to expect certain things from love. The uncertainty, the withholding, the push and pull that makes passion feel like proof of realness. To your nervous system, calm devotion may register as absence of feeling because it has never been given the opportunity to learn the difference between stillness and emptiness. But given time, given the slow, patient accumulation of moments in which you were met rather than managed, it will recalibrate. You will notice it in very small things at first, responding without overthinking every word, sitting in silence without scanning for meaning, speaking without editing yourself into a more defensible version of what you actually feel. That is not coincidence. That is your nervous system finally believing that it is safe to be present. And presence is everything. It is the thing that every other form of intensity has been a substitute for. There is a quality this younger person brings that is easy to overlook because it does not announce itself dramatically. It is their lack of accumulated bitterness. They have not yet constructed the elaborate architecture of self-protection that repeated disappointment builds. This does not mean they are naive. Naive people do not recognize depth, and they recognized yours immediately. It means that their heart is still relatively unguarded, still capable of the kind of direct, uncalculated movement toward another person that most of us lose access to somewhere in our 20s or 30s, replaced by a more careful, more strategic version of wanting that is less painful, but also less alive. When they move toward you, they move without the 100 small hesitations of someone who has been badly hurt too many times. And that directness, that almost startling clarity of desire, is going to feel both wonderful and vaguely unfair, because it will remind you of something you thought you had permanently given up. You will feel desired in a way that seems almost out of proportion to anything you did to earn it. And your first instinct will be to look for the catch, to find the place where this is actually ordinary, dressed up as extraordinary. But the catch is that there is no catch. The proportionality is accurate. You are simply being seen by someone whose capacity for seeing has not yet been worn down to a safer, smaller scale.
And what they see in you genuinely merits what they feel. You have simply spent so long being loved by people who could only see a portion of you that you have forgotten what the whole picture looks like from the outside. This connection will ask you to let your definitions become more flexible. You have believed, perhaps without fully articulating it, that love is fundamentally a negotiation, that every relationship involves a continuous, implicit exchange in which both people manage their needs against each other's comfort. You have learned to modulate yourself, to be strategic about what you ask for and when, to suppress the parts of yourself that require too much. This younger person does not want that version of you. Not because they are unaware of the work that relationships require, but because they are interested in you specifically, your particular texture, your particular way of moving through difficulty, your particular silence, and your particular noise. They did not fall in love with a version of you that was easier to be around. They fell in love with what you actually are. And so performing a more manageable self for them is not consideration. It is deprivation of them and of yourself. The alchemy that becomes possible when two people meet this way, not as roles or social positions or careful presentations, but as actual psyches in actual contact, is the rarest thing that human beings can experience. Jung called it the conjunction,
the meeting of opposites that produces something new in both. You are not the same person after this love as you were before it. Not because it changes you from the outside, but because it completes a process of becoming that was already underway inside you. It moves you further along the path of your own individuation, toward greater wholeness, greater self-knowledge, greater capacity to be present to your own experience and to another person's. And yes, there will be intensity. You should not expect this to be quiet or simple. Two unconscious worlds recognizing each other generate a field of energy that is genuinely overwhelming at moments. An almost magnetic pull that neither of you fully understands, and both of you feel in your bodies as much as in your minds. But here is the distinction that matters. This intensity will not feel destructive. It will not feel like being pulled apart. It will feel like being pulled toward something, which is an entirely different experience. And the difference will clarify something you have confused for a long time. You once believed that passion and stability were mutually exclusive, that the price of real feeling was uncertainty, that the cost of genuine desire was the constant low hum of anxiety about whether it would continue. This will disprove that belief with evidence you cannot argue against, because you will feel both simultaneously and understand from direct experience that they were never actually in conflict. One day, not immediately, but one day, you will look at this person and find that you are not holding anything back, that you are simply there in your actual self, without management or strategy, or the low-level exhaustion of performing a version of yourself that is safer than the real one. And in that moment, you will understand what the entire arc of your emotional history was building toward. Not punishment, not lesson, preparation. Everything that broke you open, everything that required you to go deeper into yourself than you wanted to go, everything that stripped away a version of you that was not fully real. All of it was making room for exactly this quality of contact. They will not remember the younger person who loved you. You will not think about the age at all in the end, because age will have become the least interesting thing about what exists between you. What you will remember is that someone looked at the whole of you, not the curated version, not the strongest version, not the version that had already finished healing, and said, without hesitation, without performance, without any of the careful calculation you had come to accept as the inevitable texture of adult love, I see you, and I am not going anywhere. That is the difference. That is the thing beyond imagination. Not the passion, not the recognition, not even the depth of what you will feel in return, though all of it is real. The difference is the quality of the choice. They are not choosing you despite knowing you. They are choosing you because of it. And that specific reversal, being known first and chosen second, in that order, without the knowing reducing the choosing, will rewrite the story you have been telling yourself about what you are worth and what you can be given and what love, at its actual best, is capable of being. You are about to find out.